Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company. I am Captain Gifford, your Master of Ceremony for today's event. On behalf of Admiral Dan Abel, 1st Coast Guard District Commander, I'd like to welcome you to the retirement ceremony for Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg. As appropriate throughout the ceremony, I will advise you when to stand or be seated. As a reminder, please silence your cell phones for the duration of the ceremony. Military guests will remain covered until after the national anthem and the invocation. Also, the taking of photographs is permitted and highly encouraged. Thank you. The transfer of a military member to the retirement rolls marks the finality to a career that often spans more than 3 decades. It is only fitting that such an event be preceded by a ceremony designed to express the appreciation of the Coast Guard for the member and his family's many years of faithful and honorable service. Today, we are gathered to honor Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg, who will have over 33 years in the Coast Guard and 29 years of commissioned service. Before we continue, I would like to recognize Admiral Joseph Dimmick, a past 1st District Commander, Admiral Joseph Servideo, the Assistant Commandant for Prevention Policy, Admiral Joe Bobadich, the Coast Guard's Director of Acquisitions Program and an Academy classmate, Commodore Carolyn Belmore, a past 1st District Northern Region Commodore, and Master Chief Jeffrey Amatrudo, a past 1st District Command Master Chief. I would also like to give special thanks to Captain Commanding Magaletta and the staff of the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company for their assistance in allowing us to hold this retirement ceremony here this morning. I extend an especially warm welcome to Captain Muilenburg's wife Lynn, his sons Kurt and Connor, Kurt's girlfriend Sam, and Captain Muilenburg's sister-in-law Lee and brother-in-law Scott, as well as friends who have traveled to be here on this proud day. I know that Captain Muilenburg's family, more than any of us, are vividly aware of the sacrifice that he has made in service to our country, and I speak for the entire command when I say how pleased we are to have you here today. Again, military members, please remain covered until the national anthem and the invocation. Those not in uniform may choose to place your hand over your heart during the playing of the national anthem. And will the guests please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the national anthem and the invocation. 1st District Prevention arriving. First Coast Guard District arriving. And salute. Ready, 2. Color guard, present the colors.
Detail, attention. Forward, march.
And salute.
Detail, hold. Left face. Present, arm.
Ready, 2.
Detail, post, colors.
Post.
Detail, shoulder, arms. Right face. Forward, march.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present Chaplain J.D. Stallrock, who will offer today's invocation.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, we ask your presence upon us as we reflect upon and celebrate the many years of great service Captain Wayne Muilenburg and his family has given to the Coast Guard and our country. Lord, as we parade flags, as we speak words about him, and as we give him mementos, may he and his family know beyond the shadow of a doubt how grateful everyone in this room is for his being who he has been to this service. Lord, I personally am thankful for the talks that we've had, the occasional reality check he has blessed me with, and his good humor telling me and those around him that all is well. May all of us present here today witness and absorb one last time a man who has shown us how to be a leader, a brother, and a friend. We ask this of you. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Stallrock. Will the guests please be seated and uncovered? Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of this retirement ceremony is to acknowledge Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg's 29 years of commissioned service to our country. That service began almost 33 years ago when then Cadet 4th Class Muilenburg entered the United States Coast Guard Academy, and it ends this year after a long and successful career that has taken him to 11 duty stations, 9 home addresses, 4 Coast Guard cutters, and 8 years in Coast Guard headquarters. Toughest time there is. There are some tales from that lengthy time in service as you're about to hear. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Admiral Dan Abel. He oversees all Coast Guard missions across 8 states in the Northeast, including over 2,000 miles of coastline from the United States-Canadian border to northern New Jersey and extending 1,300 miles offshore. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Abel.
Good morning. Got my toes in the water, my butt's in the sands. Not a worry in the world, cold beer in my hands. Life is good today. Life is good today. I had to start with the words of a country song because it seems to really fit. We got a native son of Florida, going back to Florida. We got some Florida weather outside. We're in happy uniforms. I appreciate it. Nobody goes to court-martial in this uniform. Nobody goes to funerals in this uniform. This is for confirmations, graduations, weddings, and special days like today to be a retirement. So indeed, for the Muilenburg family, life is good today. Wayne and Lynn are surrounded by family and friends. We're truly blessed to have Connor, who made it home. If any of those Air Force guys give me any grief, send them my way. Assuming they're 2 stars and below. And we've got Kurt and Sam, thanks for coming. And we've got Lynn's sister Lee and Scott as well. And we're certainly surrounded by luminaries from all around the Coast Guard. Admiral Savidio, Admiral Nimick, Admiral Vodovich, Ben Erickson from the Commonwealth, Master Chief Amatrudo, and Commodore Belmore. So I'm not sure who's running the Coast Guard today. Of course, the assumption is by having admirals here that there's a brain drain, that the Coast Guard's not well run, but I think everyone knows the secret there. The Coast Guard's running just fine with the captains in charge. So anyway, obviously the focus today should be on the future and where the future's taking Lynn and Wayne. But it's time for us to maybe do a little bit in the rearview mirror and say where life has taken them. A career that's taken Wayne in a position where we've placed the ultimate trust that we do in our service, which is command of Coast Guard men and women afloat doing the mission of their nations offshore, rising to earn the reputation as the preeminent subject matter expert on navigation and waterways management, ultimately rising to become the chief navigator for the Coast Guard. But given Wayne's involvement in either driving boats or helping other people drive boats in a safe regime, I figured I'd link together 29 years by using seagoing navigation themes. And so we'll start with his first home port. Wayne was born in New Jersey. Now, as we typically do, we figured we'd reach out to the public officials in New Jersey and see if the governor wanted to say anything to recognize his 29 years of service. And as it was, it looks like the governor delegated down to an assistant to the Undersecretary of Veteran Affairs. And it's to Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg, United States Coast Guard. Dear Captain Muilenburg, I have been contacted to offer my congratulations for your 29 years of service to our nation. However, it's come to my attention that in your teen years, you departed New Jersey for Florida. And since then, you have claimed Florida as your home. Let me make this clear. I speak for all New Jersey citizens when I share that you are dead to us. How dare you turn your back on the Turnpike State? With warmest regards, Deputy Undersecretary of Homeland Security. So, clearly that's what New Jersey thinks of you. But probably the greatest gift your dad ever gave you was to take you down to Florida when you were 15. And now you can claim Florida as your home. You certainly fell in love with the beach culture. That's the whole toes in the sand, toes in the water, beach in the sand, or something like that. But anyway, but in those early days of being a beach bum, he was intrigued by the Coast Guard small boats going back and forth, saving lives. I'm sure you were more intrigued by the buoy tenders that were setting buoys offshore, and, of course, ice breaking off the coast of Florida. I'm sure really got you excited. So another good move from Dad, his father served in the Coast Guard Reserve before Wayne was born, and probably planted that seed to serve in his country. So Wayne laid down a track line and had him enter the gates of the United States Coast Guard Academy in July of 1981. And who was there to receive him but the greatest class that that institution ever commissioned, the class of 1983. And for the next 29 years, that class has provided guidance and tutelage to Wayne. Wayne, sit up, please. Thank you.
It was a very warm welcome.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, yes. So anyway, sticking to the nautical theme, Roger chases Mary. That's maneuvering board, relative motion, when you put the vector on the maneuvering board. But actually, it was Wayne chases Lynn, is what he remembers from his freshman year. Because it was in chemistry class that Wayne met Lynn, and Lynn met Wayne, and something happened there, chemistry, I suppose. And as it was, Lynn left the academy after her freshman year, went on to Penn State, where she earned her bachelor's degree. She earned her master's degree at the University of Maryland, and then on to earn her doctorate at the University of South Alabama. She waited for Wayne to be an ensign 6 months before she committed to marriage, which is always sound, to see if the ensign thing will work. It's safe to say that Wayne married much better than Lynn did, and I'll just leave it at that. But Wayne earned orders as an ensign to the Coast Guard cutter Escape, which is stationed out of Charleston, South Carolina. Now, if you're not familiar with the Escape, and I know that you've got some folks that are familiar with the Escape, she was a prior Navy 1943 salvage and rescue ship. And the power of the internet is you can still find ship's logs. This is no kidding. This is not like a letter from New Jersey. This really is no kidding. And so Wayne showed up the summer of '85. It says September of '85. Ref tray suddenly ended due to an operator error in the engine room. Repair needed to reduction gear. Replaced gears, and they were wiped again due to improper installation. Emergency yard period planned. September 1985. January '86. End of yard period. So obviously Wayne got a lot of underway time during that yard period. He's quick to point out that Charleston is the second largest St. Patrick's Day celebration in the nation. And he mentioned something about stability testing of porta potties, which either you're going to talk about in your remarks or we'll just save that for the wardroom of the Coast Guard cutter Escape, because I'm sure there's a lot more to that. And there was a lot more than just tipping porta potties for Ensign Muilenburg. It looked like, and another thing I found was an incredible bust that was done. Were you there with the Blanco case?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is incredible. The crew was asked to recall from Liberty, went 1,200 miles off, and busted a boat 1,200 miles offshore, and they were asked to take the ship up to Governor's Island and present the ship and the 40,000 pounds of contraband to the Atlantic Area Commander himself. So obviously there was some note that when they got out of the yard, they really went to work. And as it was, with some salt buildup on those JG shoulder boards, Wayne earned his coverman or his command pin and headed out to the Point Barrow in Monterey, California. Now, for folks that weren't around for the '82 class, that is where the best and the brightest really went. If you can imagine commanding a ship as a JG, so the amount of experience and trust that we put in those people that earned those. He mentioned one of his highlights was, I guess he went out whale watching with local mayors. One of those just happened to be Clint Eastwood, so you took Clint Eastwood with you. He also mentioned an accidental discharge of an M16 near a pod of whales. But he made the comment that Clint Eastwood was not on board for that. So he escaped that one. So seasoned from 2 tours afloat, he headed to the Rescue Coordination Center in Seattle, where he planned, organized, and executed, up to that point, the largest exercise they ever did with the Washington State Ferry System, with over 15 agencies involved. It also was there that Kurt and Connor came into Lynn and Wayne's lives. And when I asked Wayne, tell me about your career, I have to admit, there were a lot of times he told me about his hair. Now, clearly, this hair thing has been a focus of his. So he wanted to make it clear, along with 2 children being born there, he modified his haircut to a flat top at that point. The family didn't like it, but he had a flat top. So I'm just letting you know, since that was important to him, I want to pass on to you.
Thank you.
There you go. So then Wayne went back afloat, executive officer of the Coast Guard Cutter Sorrel, where he was with his navigational beacon, the one who guided him, Admiral Joe Nimick, who was Lieutenant Commander Joe Nimick at the time. And at that point, I think the nice thing to say, Lynn, is you didn't fall in love with Governor's Island, and I'll just leave it at that. It's a polite way of saying it was a rocky love affair with living on the rock there. Important here, update, Wayne continued his flat top throughout that tour, despite the family's protest, so we're good there. And coming off that tour, then Wayne earned a chance to go to grad school, because even the most vital buoys in the world need to be pulled from the water, sandblasted, and refinished. So I'm trying to keep a nautical theme here. So anyway, he went to Marymount University, where he earned a Master of Science in Management for Organizational Effectiveness. And it was just as well, because in the academic environment with all those long-haired hippies, he decided the flat top was a no-go, and he went back to a normal haircut. Let's leave it at that. And from there, you realize there's no free lunch. You don't go to grad school for free, and you don't go back afloat. He headed off to headquarters. And he was a Central Assignment Officer for a quarter of the Coast Guard's enlisted workforce, which at the time was kind of independently managed. These were folks right out of boot camp that were waiting to go to school. And this is one of those chances where Wayne had a chance to, anyone can navigate a channel that's already marked and well established. But to establish a new channel, dredge it, and put the buoys out, which is what he did. He developed centralized management for all those folks that really, really needed to be centrally managed. And we still today benefit from the scheme that he put together that allowed standardization and centralization of that important function. Then back afloat. Second command tour afloat, and by far your favorite. It was the Sweet Gum in Mobile, Alabama. The good news of being the only heavy lift buoy tender on the Gulf Coast is every summer there's a hurricane that comes through. And you got to put the buoys back out. So he got to refit 3 times the buoys that sit in the Gulf Coast. And from there, he went to be executive officer and really the town mayor of Training Center of Petaluma. 800-acre facility, trains 4,000 students annually, and saw a 30% increase in students in the post-9/11 Coast Guard spool up. Now you realize the whole toes in the water, butt in the sand thing, you're probably thinking Florida. Well, it did work out that the California thing is pretty close to a beach too. And it was during that tour that Lynn, you presented him the ultimate California gift, a 1967 red Mustang convertible, which made Wayne to think long and hard about his planned birthday gift for you, that George Foreman girl. Didn't really seem to rank up there. But like anyone navigating any voyage, occasionally is to stop, take a fix, and think about where you're going. And at that point, Wayne had been offered command one more time afloat, and he decided that some geostability for his 2 boys is what the family needed. So it was back to headquarters, not command afloat, where he was the chief of policy and standardization for the Office of Military Personnel. He had all the things you want to do in headquarters. The Medals and Awards program, the entire personnel manual, and that's a spellbinder if you break the cover on that. Reads like a Clancy novel. The weight program, your analysis, that's a fun one. The tattoo policy, but the one that he actually kind of sunk his teeth into was uniform policy. And all kidding aside, Wayne led the biggest evolution of Coast Guard uniforms that this service had seen since the 1970s, when we transitioned from the Navy uniform to Bender Blue. It was going to the ODUs, a $23 million acquisition that outfitted the Coast Guard in something really that was iconic, has become iconic of the Coast Guard, and folks realize who men and women of the Coast Guard are when they see them on TV. And then from there, he moved to the Waterways Management Directorate, where he was the acting director. Now let me make this clear. This is a flag-level position in the Coast Guard right now. And ultimately, he's a deputy director of a new formed directorate. He was the U.S. counselor to the International Association of Lighthouse Authorities, and followed in his footsteps of Joe Nimick, was as the head of the delegation for the International Maritime Organization for Safety of Navigation. And again, his reach was much bigger than just the United States Coast Guard. International schemes for safe navigation and safe passage. And he was indeed the Coast Guard navigator for 2 years. And we all benefited from his sound counsel. And then finally, he took his expertise here up to Boston to become the prevention chief. Ironically, he doesn't have a marine safety background, but you wouldn't know it from his performance. His mentor, Joe Nimick, insisted he come up here. Then Joe saw the performance level. Joe retired a year later. So, and I often joke that his peers in the response world haven't made. Everything in response happens quickly. People go in the water, you rescue the people, oil goes in the water, you clean up the oil, things happen quickly. Everything in your world takes a long time. Bayonne Bridge, it's still going to take a long time. Now that it's permitted to get the thing raised. Buzzards Bay, a vexing, complex legal issue where we're going to make sure we've got the best scheme as we work with our partners in the state. Cape Wind, you'd think 140 windmills offshore would be easy. No, it's not. You have to deconflict with all the stakeholders who want to make use of the water. And Wayne was there to lead that. And even Fresnel lens divestitures. You'd think it'd be easy to close a lighthouse and give the lens away. Oh, no. There's a lot of competition that goes there. And through it all, he and Lynn were back on the beach, living in Hull, where they just loved it. So Wayne, your career epitomizes service and the pride of wearing a Coast Guard uniform. The uniform that you for a couple of years, stated the policy for that. I am proud to have served with you. And leading on the navigational theme, I think the sea buoy is passing down the side, mooring stations are set, and at least for the end of this patrol, you're about ready to put over the lines. And it's about time to live like beach bums once again. And I'm going to end again with some country song. Knee deep in the water somewhere, got the blue sky breeze blowing wind through my hair. Only world in the world is a tide going to reach my chair. Sunshine, there's a fire in the sky, never been so happy, never been so high. And I think I may have found my own kind of paradise. I wish you and Lynn and Connor and Kurt and Sam the best in the paradise that you have ahead of you. If you can join me here for a little more formal recognition, thank you.
Citation to accompany the award of the Legion of Merit, Gold Star, and Move a Second to Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg, United States Coast Guard. Captain Muilenburg is cited for outstanding meritorious service as Chief of Prevention, 1st Coast Guard District, from July 2010 to May 2014. Through exceptional leadership, he ensured the execution of 250,000 Coast Guard prevention activities and the vital direction to critical new programs. He championed the auxiliary, a 6,200-member force multiplier, to broadly support Coast Guard missions, including the very successful Operation Paddle Smart, which cut false searches triggered by a drift paddlecraft, and which he elevated to national prominence through a partnership with vessel manufacturers. He modernized bridge administration, digitizing a century of records and streamlining the evaluation of high-profile bridge replacements, which expedited decisions on projects tracked by the President and dependent on expiring federal funding. He was critical in resolving a decade-long disagreement between the United States and Massachusetts over tank vessels in Buzzards Bay, identifying amicable regulations to allow commerce and protect the national estuary. Facilitating alternative energy sources, he spearheaded the evaluation of natural gas facilities between the United States and Canada, expertly managing delicate international issues on disputed waters. He championed marine planning, putting the Northeast atop 9 national regions and using our waterways to the greatest benefit. He ensured the rapid waterway recovery from the devastating hurricanes Irene and Sandy, despite a host of obstacles. Finally, through increased commercial fishing vessel exams, he helped increase industry safety compliance to its highest percentage while reducing industry deaths to its lowest total in New England's over 300-year fishing history. After 29 years of dedicated service, he leaves a brilliant legacy of proficiency, leadership, and professionalism. Captain Muilenburg's ability, diligence, and devotion to duty are most heartily commended and are in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Coast Guard. Admiral will now present Captain Muilenburg with a certificate of appreciation from the President of the United States, his retirement certificate from the Commandant of the Coast Guard, and his retirement pin. Certificate of appreciation for service in the Armed Forces of the United States to Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg. I extend to you my personal thanks and a sincere appreciation of a grateful nation for your contribution of honorable service to our country. You have helped maintain the security of the nation during a critical time in its history with a devotion to duty and a spirit of sacrifice in keeping with the proud tradition of military service. Your commitment and dedication have been an inspiration for those who will follow in your footsteps and for all Americans who join me today in saluting you for a job extremely well done. My best wishes to you for happiness and success in the future. Signed, Barack Obama, Commander-in-Chief. Certificate of Retirement from the Armed Forces of the United States of America. To all who shall see these presents, greetings. This is to certify that Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg, having been retired after honorable service in the United States Coast Guard, is awarded this testimonial as an acknowledgement of duty faithfully performed during a period of over 29 years. Signed, Robert J. Papp, Jr., Admiral, United States Coast Guard, Commandant. Will Dr. Lynn Muilenburg please join Admiral Abel and her husband at the podium? Lynn, the Coast Guard would like to recognize you with a certificate of appreciation for all the support you've given to your husband throughout his career. Certificate of appreciation from the United States Coast Guard. To all who shall see these presents, greetings. This is to certify that Dr. Lynn Muilenburg has earned grateful appreciation for her unselfish, faithful, and devoted service during her husband's Coast Guard career. Her unfailing support and understanding helped to make possible her husband's lasting contribution to the nation. Signed, Robert J. Papp, Jr., Admiral, United States Coast Guard, Commandant. Thank you all. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest of honor, Captain Wayne A. Muilenburg, United States Coast Guard.
Well, the good news is the next phase of today is lunch. And it's on me. And yes, Mark Drew, for the last time, there will be an open bar. The bad news is the price of entry is having to sit through one more set of remarks, and it's a tad lengthy. Sorry. Good morning, Admiral Abel, Admiral Nimick, Admiral Servideo, Admiral Babich, Commodore Belmore, Master Chief and Mrs. Amatrudo, classmates, colleagues, friends, and family. Thank you so much for taking your time to be here today. Every one of your lives has somehow intersected with mine at some point over the last 33 years, and I am gratified beyond words that you have all taken the time to be here with me today. The turnout is truly humbling, and I am deeply honored by your presence. Admiral, thank you, sir, for making room in your incredibly hectic schedule, for your superb and amazingly supportive leadership these past 2 years, and for the generosity of your comments, and for quoting Zach Brown. For those who are unaware, Admiral Abel is himself 3 weeks away from a change of command and a subsequent move to Juneau, Alaska to take over command of the 17th Coast Guard District. So you might imagine he and Courtney, who is also here, have more than a couple things going on in preparation for those 2 huge events. I know you had to rearrange your schedule to be here today, sir. I know there's a lot going on in New London that calls for your attention, and I am both flattered and very happy that it's you who's here to officiate. So I have to be honest. I never really thought that I would be here today. And I mean that geographically, be here, and existentially, be here. First, I certainly did not foresee, even as recently as 5 years ago, that I'd be finishing a career or celebrating retirement here in Boston, of all places. a home that Lynn and I have really grown to love and are going to miss immensely. Thank you, Admiral Nimick, for pulling us up here. Second, I never could have imagined when this journey started that I'd be finishing a career or celebrating a retirement, period. Anyway, I didn't begin with that end in mind because that would have required some sort of plan, and I never really had one. Plus, there were certainly a few times throughout my career that I was pretty sure I had put this particular outcome in jeopardy. We'll talk about more of those in a bit. And finally, as my family knows from my insistence, largely ignored, that my birthdays not be wildly celebratory affairs. Are you listening? I've never been particularly enthused with the notion of being the center of attention. I have maintained for years that I wanted to leave this outfit with as little fanfare as possible, mostly to avoid putting folks through the enormous lift that's necessary to put on an event like this. But being at least somewhat bound by tradition, and having been endlessly cajoled by both a wife and a deputy, I finally caved. So my first debt of gratitude goes to those who worked so diligently to put this ceremony, this entire day, together for me. As you might imagine, things like this don't happen without a whole lot of behind-the-scenes work and preparation, and I so sincerely appreciate the tremendous efforts of my tireless project officer, Miles. Where are you? Miles Greenway is sitting in the back. He planned, checked, and double-checked every logistical detail, contingency, and backup contingency well in advance of today, and then enthusiastically and beautifully carried out my every whim. At least it seemed enthusiastic, and that's really all that matters. All while still doing his full-time day job. Everything that goes right today is because of him. Thank you. Navy Band Northeast sitting in the back. You guys traveled up here this morning from Newport, and I know you're returning after this to go back there. You have another gig on Sunday. I realize this is what you do, but your being here has really classed the whole affair up, and I sure appreciate that you took the time to do that. Would you join me in giving them a round of applause? To Chaplain Stallryan. Nice socks. Base Boston, inside joke. Base Boston color guard. The ushers will help direct you to both this room and to your seats. The side boys who you haven't seen yet. The public affairs staff whose expertise I leaned on to put together the programs that you have and who are here taking pictures. You all stepped up without question or complaint when asked, and each of you has contributed significantly to making this the special day that it is. Thank you. Finally, to the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company, especially Captain Commanding Magaletta, and especially Lieutenant Chuck Fazio, who's standing in the back. He's a museum curator, and he could not have been easier to work with. All I have to say is, wow, what an impressive meeting room. Of course, it's the people, all of you, who make the occasion special, but it's the venue that makes it memorable. Thank you, Lieutenant Fazio, for being so gracious and hospitable and sharing this wonderful space. You all have my deepest appreciation for what it is you've done. I am flattered and humbled that so many people would work so hard to make this day so special for me. Thank you all. Now, I haven't really spent a whole lot of time reviewing my life or reliving my career, trying to figure out where I screwed up and where I might have done better. I'm just really not all that introspective about these sorts of things. But I must admit that reaching this particular milestone sort of forces that retrospective just a bit. In everything from compiling the invitation list to putting together a resume and capturing past job descriptions, when preparing for a retirement ceremony, one can't help but recall past jobs, events, and people who played particularly significant roles in your life. And in conducting that retrospective, it became apparent to me that but for several unpredictable and unlikely twists of fate many years ago, I would not be standing here in front of you today. So with apologies to Daniel Handler, who wrote the Lemony Snicket book series with a slightly different title, I would note that what brought us to today is a series of fortunate events early on.
As you've already heard, I lived in New Jersey until I was 15 when my parents moved to Florida about halfway through my freshman year. That was fortunate event number one, although it sure didn't seem like it at the time. But let's just say the academic rigor in Florida was such that it allowed me to get better grades than I would have had we stayed in New Jersey, which led eventually to an offer to attend the Coast Guard Academy. I'm fairly certain that never would have happened had we stayed in New Jersey. On the other hand, if we had, maybe I'd be smarter today. Hard to know. So fast forward 4 years, much to my parents' utter delight, I took a year off after high school. Not because I needed to find myself, not because I was involved in affairs of the heart with some girl, just really because I had no life plan, which Lynn would tell you mirrors present day. I spent that year, along with the previous 3, working at a grocery store on the beach on Anna Maria Island. And when I wasn't working, I was hanging out on that beach, going down roads that didn't go anywhere good, and exploring tunnels that didn't necessarily have light shining at the ends. It was there, on that beach, as the admiral mentioned, that I occasionally saw Coast Guard boats whizzing by that I later learned were 41-footers out of nearby Station Cortez. And I clearly remember thinking, now that would be a cool job. Driving a boat close to the beach, looking at all the hot girls with binoculars. It never dawned on me that they might actually have missions, or what in the world those missions might be. I was 19 with age-appropriate priorities. So, fortunate event number 2 was that there happened to be a Coast Guard station fairly close to where I spent most of my time. And their tooling by on small, fast boats certainly piqued my interest. I didn't realize at the time, of course, that by attending the academy, I would block myself out of that particular career path. But I did a little research, emphasis on little, and applied to the Coast Guard Academy. It was the only college application I submitted with no backup plan if I was rejected, which I was, for bad odds. So I asked my eye doctor to write a letter to Academy admissions, a letter I still have a copy of because it changed everything. He did. That's fortunate event number 3. The Academy reconsidered for some reason, fortunate event number 4. And I was informed in late May of 1981 that I needed to be in New London 45 days later. Which led directly to fortunate event number 5. And no, sir, that's not having been trained by the class of 1983. Although that was inarguably a highlight. Now, fortunate event number 5 was in January of 1982, when, as you've already heard, I happened to sit next to a girl in chemistry class who caught my attention. I'd like to blame my C in chemistry on the distraction she caused me, because she was a huge distraction, but the truth is, I just don't get chemistry. And I got a D in calculus, and she wasn't even in that class. She told me much later that she had been attracted to my hair. It's true. Can you believe it? Big switch on my part. And as for me, I was attracted to her eyes. Although Lynn left the academy at the end of our freshman year, we dated for the next 3 years and were married about 6 months after I graduated, which was fortunate event number 6. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a long Coast Guard career was not necessarily something that I foresaw in those early days, and something that I imagine retired CW04 Pete Boardman, who is currently a member of my staff, would second, after having worked with me way back when. Then being 2 Boardman, reporter aboard escaped about a year after Ensign Muilenburg had. And we've had a pact ever since, that if he wouldn't talk about my stupid ensign shenanigans, I wouldn't talk about his exploits either, which was far more gracious of him than it was of me, because I presented him a target-rich environment, and if he did silly things, like most boatswain mates, he kept them hidden. So Pete, I either have to thank you for your loyalty and discretion, or just thank God that you're too damn dull to remember the details. Either way, the end result is the same. There was a time, for example, that an escape pulled into Key West for a 2-day port call. As morale officer, it was my job to coordinate leisure activities for the off-duty crew, other than the primary leisure activity in Key West, which, as those of you who have been there know, centers around alcohol. So I negotiated with Coast Guard crew Key West to allow us to use, free of charge, their fleet of brand new bicycles. But the folks doing the lending made it clear that these were brand new, just delivered, never having been used by their own crew, and we need to exercise extreme care. I gave them all the proper assurances, went back to the ship, gathered the entire crew, and read them the riot act about using these bikes. And the crew did great. Every bike was returned without a scratch, except the one ridden by Anson Muilenburg, who was horsing around with another junior officer racing in too close proximity when his pedal got stuck in my front wheel and I wiped out spectacularly. And the worst part was this happened right alongside the ship. So the crew, the same crew who had been on the receiving end of my earlier harangue, witnessed the whole thing. And those who didn't were called topside, so they too could enjoy the spectacle. I seem to recall some cheering, some clapping, some general glee emanating from the ship. A hungover corpsman patched me up, and to this day I still have scars reminding me of that event. And I sheepishly returned 9 bikes in great condition to the group, and 1 in slightly less than pristine condition. And that little incident aboard Point Barrow that the Admiral mentioned, allegedly involving M16s and killer whales, sir, that whole thing was completely misrepresented in the press, and the reality is much more than that. Still, at the time, I was pretty sure I had just had the shortest patrol boat commanding officer tour in Coast Guard history. Then there was a potentially life-altering event that occurred in Seattle, when I was asked to plan a Canadian Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard search and rescue exercise involving several boats and aircraft from both countries. It took about 8 months to put together all the moving parts. The exercise was to be held in the middle of the Strait of Juan de Fuca in what turned out to be fairly choppy waters. On the day of the event, I brought with me a large accordion folder with all the plans, call signs, radio frequencies, points of contact, etc. My job was to run the first half of the exercise from the Coast Guard 41-footer and the second half from the Canadian Coast Guard hovercraft. I would transfer from one to the other sometime during the drill, which was great planning and horrible execution. As the hovercraft approached the stern of the 41, which was the only place you could make the transfer from because of the difference in heights, instead of waiting for the coxswain to indicate when I should step over based on the sea state and timing of the swells, I went when I saw the opportunity. As I stepped from the 41, a swell separated the 2 boats, and I fell in between. I had 2 thoughts, in reverse order of importance, as my head went underwater. Number 1, keep the accordion folder above water so I don't lose 8 months worth of work, and I can continue to run the exercise. And number 2, hey, isn't there a propeller back here somewhere? I was lucky in the important one of those 2 things, but I did lose my 8 months worth of work and ended up running the rest of the day's exercise from memory, sitting in my cold, wet, saltwater encrusted uniform aboard the hovercraft, which my Canadian friends found absolutely hilarious. I could go on, there are plenty more examples further downstream, but I think you get the point that I did plenty of stupid things along the way. But I always seemed to be surrounded by good people who had my best interests at heart. My appreciation and admiration for nearly all of my bosses and coworkers, those of today and those of the last 30 years, is nearly inexpressible. How did I get so lucky to work all these years with so many good, talented, professional, caring people? Your presence here today is continuing proof that when something is truly important, like the ceremony, you're on hand to make sure I don't screw it up. And if I do, you'll step in to help me out. Which brings me to my second wave of thank yous. But first, a pop quiz. If you will take out your pencils and paper, please. Look at you, Master Chief, you're doing. Good for you. What do a turtle sitting on a fence post and my career have in common? I'll give you a minute. Now, I know you're all thinking of answers that involve the words lethargy or dim-wittedness. But the answer I'm looking for is neither happened without a whole lot of help. These past 3 decades have been a real team effort. If you're a country music fan, you may know a song by Kenny Chesney entitled I Didn't Get Here Alone. It's beautiful in its orchestration and its sentiment. The message, as the title implies, is that while he's the guy in the spotlight, it took a whole lot of support and encouragement from a whole lot of people for a whole lot of years to get him there. That is certainly true in my case. to my incredibly talented staff, and I include in that group the International Ice Patrol, represented here today by Commander Gabrielle McGraw. Thank you for being so amazingly easy to lead, so enjoyable to spend time with, and for always trying to make me look good. You have consistently performed magnificently, and I am honored to have walked in your midst. You should also know that you are collectively far more responsible for the award that Admiral Abel presented me than I am, and it's to you that it's owed. My two deputies, Joe Boudreau and Wayne Claiborne, both here today. You have both been my confidant, my alter ego, and my devil's advocate, and the glue that held our 45-person division together. With your consistent support, sage advice, and loyalty, my responsibilities have been an easy load to carry. Thank you both. To my fellow district staff 06s, Anthony Popeil, Bob Whitehouse, Dave Gardner, Pete DeCola, Chris Moradian, Mike Antonellis, and Kevin Serrault, along with those who have gone before, Admiral Joe, Tom Petullo, Rob Tarantino, and Tina Cutter. I have never served at another unit where my peers were not only so aligned with each other, but actually enjoyed each other's company so much. I will really miss our brown bag banter, our email banter, our camaraderie, and your friendship. You have collectively set the standard against which I'll be measuring any future coworkers I might have. Mr. MC, our Chief of Staff, Vern Gifford. Now, Vern and I didn't always see eye to eye on every issue, especially that whole holiday morale cruise kerfuffle. I've got to get my licks in now before I've got the microphone, because I know. But you were always gracious, forgiving, accepting of my rants, and luckily for me, very thick-skinned. The lightheartedness and humor with which you approach your job belies how hard your job really is. You make it look easy. Thank you. I enjoyed working with you this past year and your previous 3 years in your Sector CO role. You and the Admiral certainly have made coming to work a lot of fun. Thank you both. To Assistant Commissioner Ben Erickson from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. I can't tell him how comforting it was as we ground through all the years of Buzzards Bay lawsuits and negotiations to have a Commonwealth ally I knew I could trust. Even if our professional interests sometimes diverged, you never made a relationship, Ben, feel antagonistic or contentious. Thank you for that and for being here today. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize just a few other folks who helped hold the ladder as I climbed to success. And this is always a dangerous effort because, let's face it, none of you would be here today unless you had played a part in my journey. But still, there are a few folks who hold a very special place in my heart. First, from my Seattle days, was Lieutenant Jim Becker. Now retired and living in Sitka, Jim couldn't be here today, but that doesn't change the fact that it was he, more than anyone, who changed my career path from white to black holes. He was the senior controller of the 13th District Rescue Coordination Center, and I was one of his watchmakers. We led ops briefs every morning, where we summarized the previous day's cases to the senior staff. If we had nothing to pass, Jim would insist that we throw pictures of buoy tenders up on the screen, or talk about a recent buoy tender success, or make us share some arcane bit of Aton trivia, which was a pretty sneaky way of opening up a whole other career path for this unsuspecting lieutenant. He also sent me T-80 to Iris, a 180-foot buoy tender out of Astoria, Oregon, for 3 weeks to fill in for the XO. I worked my first buoy there under the guidance of Scott Peisel from the class of 1988, and I was hooked. So I have Jim to thank for setting me on a path that I have so immensely enjoyed. Next, retired Commander Pete Marsh, who came up today from New London, Connecticut. Pete was one of the very few approachable first-class cadets for this particular fourth class, and that approachability, friendliness, and guidance has continued to this day. In Seattle, he taught me with incredible patience and in terms even this technophobe could understand about all the technology that would help me do my command center job. And he and Gail have continued since then to be terrific friends, regardless of the fact that we frequently seem to live on opposite coasts from each other, or that he still sees fit to occasionally issue me demerits for one of my many shortcomings. Sweet gummers. I think longingly and more often of my sweet gum tour than any other. That is the one job I've had that I would gladly do for the rest of my life, as long as I had that same crew to do it with. I thank them for making that job the highlight of my career. And to Admiral Joe Nimick, my commanding officer aboard Sorrel first, then mentor and role model, and finally, deeply devoted friend who has had the longest and most significant impact on my career of anyone in uniform. If it was Jim Beckham who planted the Aton seed, it was Joe Nimick who watered, nurtured, and grew it. I recall a Sorrel shipmate, then ensign, now Captain Tony Serrallo, who was also in the audience, offering that sailing up the Hudson River with Lieutenant Commander Nimick was similar to what sailing down the Mississippi with Mark Twain must have been like. Enormous stores of unique insight and experience, easily shared and leaving those under his charge hungry for more. It is Admiral Nimick that I have consistently turned to since the early 90s when career questions arose, and he has never failed me. It is he who is directly responsible for our having lived in both Ellicott City, Maryland, and in Huntingtown, Maryland. It is he who is directly responsible for extending my career beyond my last tour in D.C. Boy, am I glad that is not my last memory of active duty. By championing me for a position here in Boston, a position that didn't traditionally fit with my afloat background, but that he had faith that I could do nonetheless. He also kept me sane during some pretty crazy headquarters years, and I am so thankful we overlapped there for a while. Yes, he taught me to love Louis Ten, but far more important, his deep grounding, his grace, style, ease, and humility, his leadership, and his natural ability to see creative solutions to vexing problems showed me an alternative approach to life I have tried to exemplify, and for which I will always be grateful. To the men and women of the Distinguished Coast Guard Academy class of 1985, Joe Bobadich, Jim McCauley, Bobby Lamb, Tom Stan, Don Kofeld, Michelle Dazan, and Mark McCabe. It's hard to believe it's 33 years since we started this journey together on a hot July day in 1981. You have each been such a big part of my Venn diagram for a very long time, and you cannot imagine how gratifying it is for me to look out into the audience and see the very same people I started this odyssey with over 3 decades ago are here today at the end of it. It's been a great run, made better by the fact that we shared the journey. And every one of you had to travel to be here today, some significant distances at personal expense and inconvenience, except of course for Mark McCabe, who simply walked here for work, but you know, at his age, that too is a real commitment. There's a bond among classmates that's unbroken by time or distance. There's been a lot of water under the keel since some of us last communicated, but that never seems to diminish our kinship. Thank you, classmates, for being here at this, my final official function, and for contributing to making this day so special to me. My life is immeasurably enriched by having had each of you in it. I sincerely hope our universes will continue to intersect long after today's festivities are over. Until that happens, I look forward to the day it does. To Lee and Scott, you and Mitch, you, Mackenzie, your mom, have been our center of gravity, our anchor for family events for a very, very long time. I can't express how comforting it was for us to know that regardless of the changes inherent in a military lifestyle or the location of our current domicile, the constancy of your unconditional love and support was rock solid. And I hope it brings you some small measure of joy to know that now that the moves are about to come to an end, the painting and building and fixing and remodeling that you so generously helped us with every 3 years is also about to come to an end. Maybe once more. Thank you so much for being here today. And I must also thank you, Sam, for leaving Orlando to come north with Kurt to an event where you really didn't know quite what to expect. It means a lot to me that you made the effort to be here, and I know it means a lot to Kurt too. And last but certainly not least, to my family. Of the two of us, Lynn has had the much harder road to hoe during the course of our marriage, and not just because she was married to me. In 29 years, I've had 11 jobs in 9 different locations. We've moved on average every 3.2 years, and they haven't been down the street moves. 6 of the 9 have been over 1,000 miles. Not only did every move require that she find a new teaching job, but at several of the places we lived, she had more than one job because the first one wasn't exactly what she was looking for. So no sooner would she get that dream or dreamier second job than I'd have orders again and she'd be torn away from it. I took her away from jobs she really enjoyed in Charleston, in Carmel, and again in Petaluma. Still, she was always up for the adventure of moving to a new place, and I couldn't have asked for more support than I got from her. When it came time for grad school, Lynn really wanted to pursue genetic engineering. That was her true passion, so she applied and was accepted. She also applied and was accepted to the University of Maryland's Master of Instructional Systems Development program, and she sort of reluctantly chose that out of pragmatism. She reasoned that it would be more likely, given our probable lifetime of moving, to be employed as a teacher than as a geneticist. So in addition to having to find new jobs, every time we moved, which is difficult in any profession, her entire career choice was sacrificed and made subservient to mine. She could have been and done anything she chose, yet she chose to be a Coastie's wife, and for that she paid a professional price. Which doesn't mean she hasn't been wildly successful. Of all the amazing things she has done, pursuing and obtaining her doctorate, being a tenured professor, a published author, owner of her own consulting company, achieving her administrator certifications, which allows her to be a school principal, being named a finalist in a very competitive Fulbright scholarship process, and making finding new jobs everywhere we move seem easy. All incredible in their own right. They pale in comparison to the job she's done raising our two boys. Many times alone. Boys who have grown into mature, sensible, level-headed, wonderful, enjoyable people because of her. Now, lest there be any doubt, I was there for both the laying of the keel and the launchings. But it's certainly true that I missed more than a few post-commissioning events throughout each of their lives, and all that fell to Lynn. She is responsible far more than me for how incredibly well-adjusted our two young men turned out to be. The prospect of moving every few years didn't present many opportunities for Kurt and Connor, just as it doesn't for most kids. Having to leave friends, schools, activities, and routines they embraced and enjoyed, en route the great unknown, just to do it all over again, and knowing the next landing would only be for a few years as well, doesn't seem like opportunity. It seems, from their perspective, like turmoil, especially as they get older. There's nothing in it for them. There's no upside to moving. Yet neither one of them ever, not even once, not even a little bit, complained about having to move yet again. I'm sure they were saddened to leave friends, probably a little nervous about being a new kid in school yet again, but neither ever blamed me for routinely and regularly introducing such chaos into their lives. And they could have, because it was certainly my responsibility and my fault. It is simply not possible that I could have received any more support from you both than you gave me, without my even having to ask for it. Throughout their lives and to this day, Kurt and Connor have inspired and amazed us with their talents and character, and they both bring indescribable joy into our lives. My most important legacy to the world, one I share with their mother, is not the Coast Guard or anything else I might accomplish in my professional life. It is you, Connor, and you, Kurt. You both believe in me more than any father has a right to expect, and I have been a far better officer trying to become the person you have long believed I already am. Lynn, you have seen me at my worst and stuck with me. You are far more patient with me than I am with you. That is one of my failings and one of your greatest strengths. I have given you ample opportunity over the years to exercise those prodigious stores of patience, yet you continue to overlook my many flaws and teach me what forgiveness looks like. Through it all, your balance, your encouragement, and your love and support have sustained me. I am so incredibly fortunate that for some reason you see fit to renew my contract every year. Thank you for being such a great friend and life partner, and for 29 years in a profession I love nearly as much as you. So I can see Mark True back there making unparched gestures, which means I better wrap this up. I never expected to like the Coast Guard so much. I joined because I didn't see any other options. Granted, it looked very hard, but in hindsight, I am so glad I did. I have received far more from the service than I could ever have put back into it. The Coast Guard has provided me one opportunity after another to lead a rewarding and fulfilling career and personal life. And I am so deeply grateful to the Coast Guard for allowing me to work among such an incredible collection of people who found a similar calling. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn, teach, and grow, not only as a professional Coast Guardsman, but also as a human being. This transition occurs with a measure of surprise at the rapid passing of the years, but without regrets or second thoughts. My career has been a joy and a privilege for which I am and will always remain eternally grateful. That career and my life within it have truly been a most fortunate series of events. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for sharing this day with me.
Commander Claiborne will now read the watch.
For 29 years, this shipmate has stood the watch. While some of us went our bunks at night, Captain Muilenburg stood the watch. While some of us were in school, learning our trade, Captain Muilenburg stood the watch. Yes, even before some of us were born, Captain Muilenburg stood the watch. In those years, when the storm clouds of war were seen brewing on the horizon of history, Captain Muilenburg stood the watch. Many times he would cast an eye ashore and see his family standing there, needing his guidance and help, needing that hand to hold during those hard times, but he still stood the watch. He stood the watch for 29 years. He stood the watch so that we, our families, and our fellow countrymen could sleep soundly and safely each and every night, knowing that a sailor stood the watch. Today we're here to say, shipmate, the watch stands relieved. Relieved by those you have led, guided, and trained. Thank you, Captain.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and remain standing for the benediction, the playing of Semper Paratus, and the departure of the official party. Military guests, please remain uncovered.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, as we bring this ceremony to a close, we pray your Spirit will guide us, will give us the strength and wisdom to pick up where Captain Muilenburg has left off. Be with him, his wife Lynn, son Connor, and Kurt as he takes off the uniform for the last time and travels across many bridges, some he knows too well, to Florida. Be with them as together they say goodbye to what has been such a huge part of their lives. We beg you, Father, to open the right doors for them so that they can continue to live and to serve according to your will. May we all leave here today taking hold of the template of leadership he has given us. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Semper Paratus. 1st Coast Guard District departed. Side boys, post. Now, Captain, United States Coast Guard, retired, departed. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the official portion of today's ceremonies. Please join Captain and Dr. Muilenburg for the reception aboard Central Wharf Company, located at 160 Milk Street on the 2nd deck. Thank you all for attending this morning's event.